Hello everyone, friends, surfers, slackers, deviants. Starting broadcast. Today we have I-3, the first with Anastasia Pilyavski, who is well known to you. We will discuss India and Pakistan as everyone is buzzing about it on, well, yes, on every lips, on everyone is talking about it. Today this is the topic, and my subscribers are buzzing in my ears accordingly. What's going on? Secondly, we will also discuss Alexei's Kushi, various economic trends, Ukrainian global, and the third is Alexei Arestovich. After the 20th, we will have a big broadcast. Initially, it was supposed to be dedicated to the wizard from the Emerald City, an unforgettable work and issues of power. But since Reuters released Trump's plan, an additional topic has emerged, which we will carefully and tactically introduce and examine in a comprehensive manner. Nastya, hello.
Hello. Good evening.
I would like to remind you that Anastasia Pilyavski is a specialist in India, having been involved with it for 20 years at the Cambridge Institute of India, where she works. She knows the Indian elite very well in all aspects of the word. She is deeply knowledgeable about the topic, knows what is happening, how it is happening, and why it is happening. And therefore, well, I think that in Ukraine, there are only a couple of people, and next week I will invite someone else who might have deep expertise in the topic. That's why we turn to Nastya. Let's start with something little. Let's say the prospect of everything escalating into a full-scale war is high, considering that it is important to note that these are two nuclear powers between which military conflicts or confrontations have periodically occurred over the last 80 years. Moreover, there have been several serious wars that have resulted in significant casualties. Relations are further strained by terrorist acts, primarily in Kashmir, and ongoing tensions. And essentially what became the new trigger was that as a result of a terrorist act, more than 20 people died, and I believe several dozen were injured, and this sharply escalated the tensions. And we see Pakistan strategically moving its army to the borders. India has stated that it will block the Indus River as it has dams in the upper reaches of the Indus that can regulate the flow. Naturally, this creates problems for Pakistan, as the Indus is a key river that supports agriculture, industry, and everything else. In general, for now, as they say, the current situation is climbing the escalation process ladder.
Well, you have to remember, if you start from the Indus River, you have to remember where the top is. It's important to remember that all the rivers of northern India, as well as the rivers of Pakistan, one must recall where they originate. Do you remember where they originate, where their source is?
I really absolutely have no idea at all.
And trouble in China. So let's just start with the river. I think it's very important to understand that, firstly, India cannot block the Indus River. This is just an escalation now. Threats are happening from both sides. It literally cannot block the Indus River. It threatens to do so, it's been 10 years already, without flooding the most important, essential, and vital agricultural lands. The same Punjab on which Modi is very politically dependent, which voted against him, and so on. So that won't happen. The question is really serious about whether there will be a full-scale war here. Again, we need to think about what we mean when we say full-scale war, indeed. Will there be a full war between the two countries? No, this is very unlikely, and even nuclear rhetoric is currently absent, despite everything being very tense. The war in Kashmir, I think, I'm almost certain, will likely develop. It already started to develop this morning because this war, in fact, essentially introduced, in general, the state has been like this for a very long time, since the founding of India, essentially since the 1947 partition of India and Pakistan. This will certainly heat up. And the question here is such a question that interests everyone. Was Pakistan behind this terrorist attack? And it's also not a fact that it was. So on one hand, Pakistan is currently in a cornered position Inside there is a lot of internal political chaos. So the military essentially rules the country, and there's a lot of tension between the military and the civilian authorities. In March of this year, just recently, earlier this year, there was a noteworthy incident that somehow flew under the headlines. But in Balochistan, where separatist activity is undeniably boiling and the Taliban is very active, a train was hijacked in Pakistan. And the government, in an effort to try to alleviate the situation, the terrorists who hijacked this train claimed that they killed 80 people there, and there were even government members among them. That is, besides the fact that economically and politically Balochistan is very isolated, the military needs to show its strength. And at the moment, they are losing significantly to the Taliban, both on the Afghan border and in Balochistan. So it is quite likely that they might have tried to demonstrate their strength in this way. This very much resembles October 7th, of course. A very similar group of terrorists enters the country and specifically attacks vacationing tourists. 26 people were killed. It was a tour group that was on horseback through the beautiful, scenic, and picturesque. Kashmir is a very, very beautiful state, and they were wandering in the forests there. And they were attacked by a group. It was Islamists. They attacked mainly the men. They mocked them, the Hindus, forcing them to take off their pants to show whether they were circumcised or not. If they claimed to be Muslims, they were forced to recite prayers to verify if they were truly Muslims. And now the question is very pressing in Parliament today. This question was raised in India. Why was there no military presence there? How could they get through there? On one hand, to say that the Indian government could have created a context, as many said in Israel, that the Israeli government deliberately allowed the attack to happen in order to create a casus belli for an attack on Gaza. Here there was already a hint at this, but the government, in principle, explained quite clearly, in my opinion, why there was no military presence, because tourists usually start entering Kashmir, which is very cold. The states, there's a lot of snow, so they enter in May and begin to guard these areas. But now with global warming, tourists are already starting to come in early to mid-April. So in principle, this is quite convincing. Returning to the question of whether Pakistan is behind this, on one hand, one could say that for the military government of Pakistan, it might be politically advantageous to show that they can attack India. This is always politically advantageous, both in India and in Pakistan. On the other hand, they are currently in a position where a war with India is not beneficial if you consider that they need to significantly develop their economy. There was a recent visit, the first in 15 years. The foreign minister of Pakistan visited Bangladesh. They are trying to form an alliance with Bangladesh. And it's not very beneficial for them right now. Well, I don't know, something like that.
So you predict that it will likely be more of an ongoing and persistent local conflict where there is periodic tension at the state level, but it doesn't in the region and beyond escalate into global tension, considering that both countries have significant interest behind them, so to speak. Because, for instance, Pakistan indeed plays an important role, logistics, and essentially, let's say, geopolitically for China as well, with the Karakoram highway, the Gwadar port, and everything else, the Gwadar project. That's why I think, in my opinion, considering that Modi and Xi Jinping started communicating well after the Kazan Forum, it is important to note that I believe that China began to communicate effectively and efficiently, which is indeed trying to rebuild relations with India, especially against the backdrop of its direct confrontation with the United States, will seek tools to restrain and exert pressure on Pakistan as well. And this probably also concerns India, which is indeed an independent player and a very major one. But again, a lot of interest from various countries are tied to it, including including the United States, Europe, and China. Therefore, I also proceed from the logic that this framework will weigh on Modi because, first of all, he will set the pace in this confrontation as the larger, more comprehensive and broader influence, significantly impacting various aspects of this context and perspective, resourceful. And as the affected party, he determines the level of response. That's how I think it all looked.
Yes, absolutely. In Pakistan, China is currently building a very important and significant branch for itself of its Belt and Road Initiative, an economic and trade route, a crucial trade route. This is their access to the Arabian Sea. They are not very pleased with Pakistan because their companies, which are now constructing this railway, have been attacked by terrorists. There have been Taliban attacks, and the Pakistani army, which guaranteed them security, it cannot guarantee it. Pakistan, on the contrary, needs to show this is a very advantageous thing for Pakistan. It is very important now to show China that they can still control the country and will not start wars. Yes, Modi. Look, what is remarkable, it is very important that this happened at that moment. Well, and partly because of this, many analysts think that Pakistan was indeed behind it. That at the time of the terrorist attack in India, J.D. Vance was indeed there, who only left this morning, meaning he did not shorten his visit. At the same time, Modi was with the Saudis in Saudi Arabia. He returned to India faster than planned. But the point is that J.D. Vance was there not only to develop economic and trade relations with India. He was clearly there because it was a long visit, I believe 5 days, meaning he was there to discuss more serious strategic military issues. Later this year, Trump will be in India. He will definitely attend the Quad meeting, which will be a meeting of 4, meaning Japan, Korea, and the United States in total, respectively. That's it. They will discuss, Vance clearly discussed this, and at this meeting, security and military cooperation will also be discussed. Trump is indeed the only one who called this Quad alliance a military alliance. That is, he truly views the Indo-Pacific, the Indo-Atlantic zone, which, by the way, is a term coined by Obama, as a very important, indeed crucial, key territory for himself. And it's important to understand that neither Japan, nor Korea, nor Australia can be the main military partner of the US in this zone, because they are essentially they are economically satellites of China. Japan, Australia, and Korea as well. But India is not a satellite, although it has trade relations with China, as I have mentioned in broadcasts. Are increasing, currently growing, and now India and China are on the verge of signing a major trade agreement where China, among other things, agrees to balance the massive trade deficit, which is currently 100 billion between India and China. So there is a significant rapprochement happening, but still India is truly an independent agent, an independent actor. Here, so the US is closely watching India as its base in this particular region of the world, and its strategic importance is being carefully monitored by the United States. So yes, there will be pressure, and pressure is already happening. This is abundantly clear, for example, from the fact that the New York Times undeniably published an article with the headline that it's a military attack, a militaristic attack, clearly. The State Department immediately responded to this and said that it was terrorism and that it should not be linked to Pakistan's state structures. And Trump similarly confirmed this with a tweet stating that he does not consider it a Pakistani attack on India, but simply a terrorist act. Modi is indeed also expressing himself very cautiously now. At the beginning, a member of his government got a little heated and attacked Pakistan, claiming that it was Pakistan's doing. Pakistan said, no, it wasn't us. How can you say that? Take your words back. Well, all of this is just political showmanship. And Modi, indeed, in principle, said that their stories are already aligning. They said that they found 4 people, 2 of them Indian citizens and 2 of them Pakistanis living in Indian Kashmir. But what we want from our Indian side is the extradition of Hafiz Saeed by Pakistan, who was one of the participants in the biggest terrorist attack in India to date in Mumbai. Remember, in 2008, there was a major terrorist attack at a hotel in Mumbai, and Hafiz Saeed was one of the remaining ones, and he is still in Pakistan now, while the other was a terrorist in the States. And the States, Trump already handed him over to India a long time ago, and now he is in an Indian prison. So we'll see. The government has, at this very specific moment in time, reduced the charges against this group and Hafiz Saeed specifically. So they are kind of rolling back their accusations against Pakistan, seeing that...
You know, as you were speaking, it started to remind me of the situation with Horokus. Do you remember when there was that terrorist attack in Moscow and Russia initially started to aggressively push the version involving Ukraine, but then it all began to fall apart very quickly, and in the end it led to Central Asia and the traces got tangled. To this day, no one is exactly certain who, what, or some group, whether it's ISIS, Khorasan, or entity, which is wandering somewhere in Tajikistan or in Uzbekistan or in these countries combined in Central Asia. So by the way, our subscriber, a citizen of UA, wrote to us. He wrote a few more fascinating comments. He writes that this is another Kremlin truck. Could you comment on the Russian trace? I think it's not like that. For about 30 years, Pakistan trained and financed terrorist groups on its territory at the behest of Western countries, including the USA and Britain. This was stated by the Minister of Defense of Pakistan, Asif, in an interview with Sky News. According to Asif, sponsoring the training of terrorist groups was a mistake, and Pakistan paid the price for it. He also rejected the accusation against Pakistan of using militants as proxy forces, stating that it was the states themselves that engaged in this. So blame shifts to the states. Stay tuned.
Yes, but now this is very politically popular, meaning such anti-Western rhetoric has immediately started coming from Pakistan. So, and I think this rhetoric is kind of an apology towards China, like, no, we are fine, and we even really don't like the United States. Continue building your railway, develop our ports, and so on, such as... So, in my opinion, I believe strongly that here the hands of the Kremlin and influence. The Kremlin is indeed hard to trace. Even the finger of the Kremlin is not very noticeable. More of this might be happening if you shift your attention. It might be more happening in Bangladesh, but here the situation is indeed a bit different. And the connection between Bangladesh and Pakistan, well, maybe the hand of the Kremlin is traced there simply because the Kremlin was very close with the previous government. Bangladesh, which I remind you was under the rule of one party, one government for 15 years. This government was in power, ousted last year. There were student protests. They had their own kind of Maidan. And some commentators believe that this Maidan, it didn't happen without the hand of the Kremlin. The Kremlin loves Maidans. In this context, it is quite likely that the new government of Pakistan, they haven't had elections after this Maidan. Currently, Pakistan is currently administered by the overseer ruler, Mohammed Yunus. He is indeed an entertaining figure, but I have just gone through the Russian reaction to all this. And there is certainly a lot of emphasis on the good new relationship with Bangladesh. A representative from Bangladesh was one of only 3 representatives from South Asia at the Kazan meeting. They are clearly up to something there. But again, I'm not much of an expert on Bangladesh, but if the Kremlin's hand is evident anywhere, it's there. And in Pakistan at the moment, we also need to remember about India's current military position, that India has approximately 50,000 of its troops now stationed on the border with China, while India is significantly expanding its trade relations with China and strategically. The ongoing military tension, which is naturally fueled by the US agenda and its interests in the region, the military standoff between India and China is in a semi-dormant yet still active state. Therefore, they simply don't have enough military resources right now to attack the Pakistanis with full force. That is, even at the level of Kashmir, this region that has been in a state of war since the birth of India and Pakistan, the conflict there will not be gigantic. So I do not expect a large-scale conflict at all, but a regional, localized one, yes, certainly. Firstly, in the manifesto of 2003, when he was just coming into the premiership, the manifesto includes a promise to repatriate, as it is stated, to take back the entire nightmare. And after this attack and the sharp statements from the Indian government, Pakistan withdrew from the 1972 agreement called the Shimla Agreement, where they agreed on the border to mark the line of demarcation, the front line, and agree that this would be the border between India and Pakistan. Although this agreement has been violated many times by both sides, Pakistan has withdrawn from it at the moment. It's indeed as if they took the bait on this, fell into the trap of the Indian fashion manifesto. And in principle, India now even has a legitimate opportunity from Pakistan's side to advance in Kashmir.
I just have a question. Tell me, here a citizen of UA writes, the continuing confrontation between two nuclear powers always indeed causes concern, emphasized the minister. So he wrote above, I didn't finish, the story against Biden regarding the tension between Islamabad and New Delhi. He noted that Trump's attention and that of the entire global community would help resolve the conflict. So the logic is clear, especially if a visit by Trump is being prepared, then Trump might try to score points here with such a play. But I actually wanted to talk about Donald Trump himself, and in particular this whole tariff war that he declared almost against the entire world, specifically how this US foreign policy was perceived in India, which is quite disorderly and chaotic in nature and impulsive, it looks like. Some plan that they are trying to deploy and implement it there, either within the framework of this Plan Heritage Foundation or within the framework of some of their own some other strategies. But the logic is clear, yes, to resolve trade imbalances with China, bring back production, and so on and so forth. And naturally and predictably, the various countries in the surrounding region also inevitably came under this significant tariff impact. And naturally, under these conditions, well, there is certainly and definitely some kind of perspective or viewpoint towards this game by Trump and his team.
In India, people are looking at Trump with a smirk, much like many others around the world. And what's very interesting is that since January, I've been observing a very significant and notably noticeable shift in India's perception of Trump, the USA, and China, especially in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and in daily conversations, from strong belief in the USA and unwavering belief in its stability. A significant growth in admiration and respect for the leadership of Comrade Xi in China, because in the current situation, they appear to be much more reasonable, much calmer, and truly leaders in their approach in what is now being referred to by specialists as the new buzzword, geoeconomics, not geopolitics, but geoeconomics, meaning a mix of economics and the replacement of traditional military security means with economic and safe means, which of course Trump presents as part of his new political theory, his new approach to the world. But to be honest, the Chinese have been doing this for a long time. And Modi, the first thing he did when he came into the premiership, notably, one of his first visits It was a visit to China, and he was very impressed by what he saw in China. He was truly very astonished and deeply impressed by how the Chinese love Comrade Xi. And upon seeing the Chinese economic machine and prosperity, which was evident everywhere he looked, he made it a model for himself. And this reflects the vision in India, where China never appeared as an example, never appeared as comrades, nor the Chinese in general as people to emulate. Now, this is changing significantly alongside the fact that Trump appears quite like a comical figure, not only from India, but including in India. That's how it is.
In this aspect, Trump doesn't have many trump cards to play in India, even against the backdrop of this crisis.
No, he still has trump cards, even though his reputation might be tarnished in India, as in many other places. India is heavily dependent on the military front. As I have previously mentioned earlier, I believe Indian military equipment has been significantly modernizing indeed since 2016. And naturally, this Indian movement has intensified since 2022. From Russian devices, systems, and calibers to various NATO ones, such as different models. And here, the USA, of course, which has declared India its main military partner in this region, and which has just recently announced, as a result, Trump recently said that by 2030, India should become the main trading partner for the USA. In other words, India strongly supports the USA in a military sense. They are increasingly developing India as their main partner in the most strategically important and geopolitically significant region. There are many cards in play, many humanitarian programs are going to India. That's what we hear about, how aid has been cut to many regions. We don't hear that in India, because India was excluded from these cuts in many programs.
And what exactly is the ultimate fate of all these transport corridors that pass either through India or through Pakistan? Because there is, as we know, the Chinese Silk Road. It turns out to be northern, as it were, but it also passes by the seas. And China is generally interested in these communications as effective tools of its expansion in Eurasia, and essentially as a tool for stabilizing the situation in Eurasia, because the countries that get involved are generally forced to somehow rebuild their foreign policy and strategy. And for China, this is also a very powerful tool of influence. Plus, in the context of what Trump has done over these 3 months, essentially speaking, a little bit over 2 months, in essence, something that couldn't have happened even 3 months ago has gradually emerged in recent times. Discussions about certain maneuvers between Europe and China, let's say, a convergence of their positions, and ongoing developments. Although these are all just speculations for now, but we know that China is actively pursuing policies in certain European countries, from France, special relations from Hungary, from Britain, by the way. Britain indeed plays an important and significant role in these relations with Europe. So how exactly does this situation really affect all of these plans?
The thing is, as I have previously mentioned, it seems that Modi is quite impressed by China and indeed very impressed by Comrade Xi. The main thing, I think, is that he is copying almost exactly China's trade routes. That is, on one hand, India is building the IMEC corridor, which goes through the Middle East to Europe, yes. And on the other hand, they are also building a less well-known corridor, which naturally, it doesn't move to the west, it moves instead to the east and south. This corridor is called the BIMSTEC corridor. It's India's route, maritime, but mainly overland through Bangladesh and into Southeast Asia, ultimately reaching the expansive and significantly influential market of Indonesia, which is a massive market, a truly gigantic market. And in general, that side of the world, which we somehow pay little attention to, it means we need to remember that when Trump announced his tariffs against China, the first thing that Mr. Xi did comradeship. He went to Japan, Vietnam, and Malaysia. That is, Southeast Asia is now an absolutely key giant market where a struggle will take place. And India is also trying to move there through Bangladesh. And here again, Bangladesh becomes critical, a crossroads, because China can also advance to those same markets through Bangladesh likewise. So, and just yesterday, I was talking with a colleague and friend who is currently an anthropologist working in Bangladesh. And he says that after the Maidan in Bangladesh in April of last year, India moved away from the good relations it had with the former government. And I think this also happened under pressure from the United States. China began to colonize Bangladesh, indeed. That is, grants, loans, Chinese presence, Chinese companies, and so on. Bangladesh is indeed a country in dire need of trade relations, as it is very poor. So the struggle now is for such a bridge into Southeast Asia. I think that's exactly it. These trade routes, this corridor will indeed play a key role here. It is quite likely that India and China could even collaborate here. If India has enough, I think if the Indian government is wise enough not to lose Bangladesh, because if they lose Bangladesh, then of course they will lose this route. And at the moment, their relations are such that this is quite possible. And again, the conflict with Pakistan could worsen again slightly. It should be remembered that Bangladesh is also primarily a Muslim country. Previously, there was East Pakistan and West Pakistan, which later split into two countries after a very bloody war. And again, in the context of Pakistan now building relations with Bangladesh, that is, on April 15th, for the first time in 15 years, the historically significant official visit by the foreign minister of Pakistan to Bangladesh took place. This diplomatic visit, after that, subsequently, the commander-in-chief of the Pakistani army made such striking statements against Hindus, provocative ones, on the basis of which the Indian government, members of the Indian government, are now saying that Pakistan was behind the terrorist attack. And then how long after? 5 days later, this terrorist attack occurred. That is, in India at least, many believe that this connection between Pakistan and Bangladesh and the terrorist attack is not coincidental. So it is necessary to look closely at this. Well, yes, and in the context naturally of what I already mentioned, how important the route through Pakistan to the ports on the Arabian Sea in the Arabian Gulf is for China. And again, for Pakistan, I think this will be a restraining factor, like, again, indeed, this is part of the same geoeconomics, which is becoming the new world order instead of geopolitics. In this sense, it won't be economists telling us how economic processes will, in fact, function and operate, how they will flow, but politicians. Because it is precisely the geopolitical and strategic meanings. On one hand, security will depend on business and business or on stability, deals and common business interests. But on the other hand, indeed, these same businesses are much more controlled by political structures.
Well, look, not being a specialist on India, understanding the logic related to the struggle for power, and listening to everything you say about the dynamics in the region, it's definitely hard not to notice that this terrorist attack happened very timely, in quotes, timely, because essentially the region, India first and foremost, is approaching a situation where a fundamental strategic choice will need to be made, especially since Trump is putting everyone before the fact that we are about to press with tariffs. And those who do not self-determine, those who side with China will regret it. And conversely, those individuals who ultimately end up in our pool will significantly benefit in various ways and aspects of their lives. And here, it's not even a question of money at stake. It's a question of global power, because absolutely right to draw attention to the Southeast Asian region, Indonesia, with nearly 300 million people. By the way, next week, we are likely to do an interview with the former Ukrainian ambassador, Vasyl Homyak, who was recently in Indonesia and is now in Congo, having moved to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And it will also be an interesting broadcast because he is a very good professional. He talked a lot about Indonesia. There were several broadcasts. So in this context, it turns out that when these tectonic plates came into action, this terrorist act actually kind of creates the necessary dynamics, the necessary context for someone who, let's say, might try to, in a way, potentially turn these processes to their advantage, or perhaps, and here at this point, it's just not clear yet who benefits in this specific situation. From what we see, Pakistan is clearly trying to distance itself. Modi is not in a hurry because he understands all the complexities. China is definitely not interested in this.
Well, yes, indeed. That's exactly why I truly think that the attack, although so much is happening right now, any incident seems to be not without reason. But precisely because I really don't see any particular interest in this at all, except that, well, there are two potential interests in principle. One is the internal political interest in Pakistan, which I already mentioned, that it would be good for the army to demonstrate their strength. It's indeed very important politically, as we see not only in South Asia, but especially in South Asia. In Pakistan, after such failures in March, it can be said that indeed Modi is also very politically insightful and astute throughout his entire governance, maintaining a delicate balance between satisfying the appetites and interests of various stakeholders. Of Hindu nationalists, the contingent of his supporters who vote for him, as well as a large contingent of coalition parties.
So Nastya dropped out. Nastya has left. Maybe she'll return now. You dropped out for a second on the word as well as the contingent in his party.
Yes, that is. Within the party, there is a certain amount of pressure to attack Muslims. In fact, to attack Pakistan as well. And on the other hand, the overwhelming majority of his electorate is absolutely not interested. Many are against Hindu nationalism. They are interested in economic development, the development of Indian reputation on the global stage, and so on and so forth. And he is constantly balancing between. So it is quite possible that it might be in his domestic political interest to show that we are giving a response, to create a casus belli in order to advance in Kashmir. But again, if India were planning to advance in Kashmir, all their troops wouldn't be stationed on the border with China. So I see very little interest here, and it is quite likely that this was indeed just a terrorist act by a group that has been doing this for a long time. It's just that they had such an opportunity here related to the fact that tourists started coming earlier, and they saw that there was simply a window of opportunity, and the troops that are usually present in this zone that are simply not there, that it is quite likely that sometimes things just simply happen without major interests. Very often, by the way, history moves more chaotically than we would in fact like.
Yes, well, and it sets a huge wheel in motion here, you could say. Remember Gavrilo Princip, who kind of missed his chance and then went to drink wine in a cafe out of grief. And it just so happened that Ferdinand actually drove right down that street, which he wasn't supposed to take unexpectedly. And in general, he was told not to go because there had been an attack. But he went, and the car stalled right near, well, basically near that cafe, and he pulled out a gun and shot. The role of chance indeed in history.
Yes, yes. Well, the thing is, once again, it's both chance and such local internal political processes. Well, for example, currently at this very moment in India, there are many protests against Pakistan demanding retaliation, which are being fueled by Modi's opposition. It's quite amusing because in principle, it's the Congress party, which has always said that we are peaceful, we don't want war with Pakistan, but it's Modi and the BJP who want this. they are actually fueling it quite a bit, as if forcing Modi to politically consider showing something in Kashmir regarding this war. I hope he won't take the bait. So far, we are carefully observing. And as you correctly noted, there is a lot of caution on both sides. And I think it will perhaps become abundantly clear where this conflict is ultimately heading when we find out whether Pakistan will hand over Hafiz Saeed or not. Because if they do hand him over, then that will be a very significant conclusion to all of this. And there might continue to be some skirmishes as they keep happening. The interesting thing is that it is important to note that all the attacks that Pakistan was really behind in Indian Kashmir were all directed at Indian military, the army, and the police, essentially targeting state structures such as the government and security forces in the region and other areas. There wasn't a lot of imaginative creativity observed there. So if Pakistan is indeed behind this now, they might have been inspired by October 7 in Israel and decided to do something completely new. Well, it's hard to imagine. Of course, it's possible.
And for Modi, as we wrap up our broadcast, the challenge also lies in the fact that India itself has a huge Muslim population, probably around 300 million, and there are definitely 250, 300 million.
Yes, indeed, 14% of the population, a very large minority, many of whom Modi is actively and strategically trying to win over, which is currently one of the many reasons why he, in his political strategy, absolutely cannot afford to antagonize Pakistan Muslims, as this is very significant, considering that Modi, we must remember, has returned for a third term. He was elected for his third term and he received far fewer votes than he expected. And even the biggest skeptics expected. He had to form a coalition. He almost lost the government. So that means for him, minorities such as Christians, but especially Muslims, are very important right now. And many of them are already joining his party. So there is no interest in starting such a war. And we see that in the context of India's reputation, he is building India's reputation as a peaceful, internationally recognized and stable, global, calm Eastern leader. The G20, a notable and significant international event, took place the year before last. Modi is developing trade, Modi is developing diplomatic relations, entering Eastern Europe, where India has never been before, and so on. The reputation of a militant state is absolutely of no interest whatsoever to him at all.
All right, let's wrap it up here. I think it's excellent. Concise in an Anglo-Saxon way, indeed. There you go. It turned out Anglo-Saxon Odessa style.
Well, yes, let's hope that I'm right and that indeed there. But again, cases and internal political pressures can influence things so that nothing is excluded, but it's very unlikely. This will certainly go beyond a local conflict.
All right, thank you. Anastasia Pilyavskaya was with us. See you very soon. We will continue the communication. I think we will see Anastasia on the air more than once. Our next broadcast is with Alexei Kushch. It will start after broadcast. Then Alexei Aristoevich at 20. No, this is Trump's plan and the Wizard of the Emerald City. We will have a very interesting broadcast. I think that's all we're finishing. Bye.